Hello, how are you?
Hi,
Nice to see you.
likewise.
How's everyone doing?
Doing good. Made
Great.
it to class on time today.
Yay! That's awesome. That is cool. Where are you based, Judy?
I'm in Dallas Fort Worth.
Okay, so an hour earlier than me, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
No, I think I'm an hour later than you.
It's 11 o'clock my time?
Oh, yeah, 10 o'clock. Okay.
Okay. So a Kalpana, you're an hour later, right?
I'm an hour later. Yeah, it's
Okay,
12.
got it. Okay. Hi, Liwen. How's
Where are
everyone?
you located at?
I'm in
Uh,
Detroit.
Detroit. Oh, I'm from Pontiac.
Are you really? That's so funny. What a small world.
Yeah, we were a General Motors family. When they closed all the factories, I don't know, a long time ago, back when I was
Yeah.
a kid, they
Yeah.
transferred us down here to Texas.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I find that wherever I go in the world, inevitably there's a Michigan connection in some way. So either people are from Detroit or from Michigan, or they had a grandparent here, or were born here, or like just wherever I go, there's always a connection. It's so funny.
All of our, I mean, generations, we all grew up right there in that area. I still have family in Romeo.
Oh yeah, lots
Yeah,
of apple orchards out there.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, hi, I think Lee is trying to connect, and we'll give it a minute or two for others to join us. But would anybody like to check in and sort of fill me in on how things are going? Did you do any of the writing? Any of the other readings? Anything you'd like to share?
Um, I read the, I really like the piece on men. What is that?
Men
Men,
come here.
uh, Men come here. Yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
that was, I mean, it did speak to me certain things, her anxieties and how she needs the help. It was very vivid. So
Cool.
I really like that piece.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So, Lee, why don't you mute your microphone if you're going to be on the phone?
Where's my mic, Alan?
I'll mute you. I did it for you. Akalpita, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And we're going to talk that today. We're going to look at probably not that one. So I'm glad you read it because we're going to look at shorter pieces in today's class to really see evidence of action. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. Um, but yeah, let's check in a little bit and then we'll get into the classwork. So, anybody else, did you try the writing exercises from last week, or has the first lesson infused your writing since then at all? Anybody else want to check in? Yeah, Li Wen.
Yeah, definitely. Since the show and tell, everything I write, I put down a sentence. Oh my God, it is show and tell. I'm being conscious,
Yep.
especially because I'm taking Lynne's other classes. One is the Finding the Voice.
Uh-huh.
It's the first session is wrapping up, so I need to go through the documents I wrote, including incorporated Lynne's comments to my own file.
Uh-huh.
So I look at all your comments, almost all of them, majority of them, do you ask why? Be specific.
Okay.
Be like I need to create a picture.
Yep.
So it's really helpful. I
Good.
think many ways good. I put your comments into my file myself,
Uh-huh.
the process. So I
Awesome.
did the writing, I think about a fear. I think
Uh-huh.
I wrote a few paragraphs about more like a fear, anxiety
Okay.
from last week's assignment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Um,
Very
I'm
cool.
not really
Yeah.
clear on that there was a writing assignment last week.
So last week we went through a whole thing in class, and I shared a Google Drive with all of you, and in the Google Drive is each week's lesson. So I can actually show it to you if you'd like. And then in there is like writing exercises that we didn't get to. So let me share my screen to show you. Okay, so this is the Google Drive, and right now there's lesson one and lesson two. And so it's sort of a synopsis of everything we went through. And if you go down all the way, writing exercises. So we went over number one in class live last week, but then number two we didn't. And so it's an opportunity for you to do some writing if you wanted to.
I think I got hung up a little bit above that on the red flag and that section there. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's as far as I got is for that. I was just too focused on that and trying to understand it and clarify, because I don't know that we touched on it a little bit in class, but I was still not getting it completely. And so I was too hyper focused on that part.
So the idea of the red flag words is just that they're red flags in your writing. So when you go back over a piece that you've written and you're trying to work on it and strengthen it and revise, you can look for those words to see if that might be a spot where you need to show more. It doesn't mean it's always going to be, it's just a red flag to sort of pay attention to. So I find one of the things that's really helpful for me, and I do this a lot in my fiction, is I'll write like, she heard the door close. Well, I could just describe the door closing, describe the sound of it. So it's automatic to be like, she heard, she thought, she tried to. And then when I go back, I'm like, well, why doesn't she just do it? Let me just show her trying to, or let me just describe what she heard, And so those are just sort of some red flags for me that I notice all the time when I'm writing. And so it's just sensitizing you to where it might be,
That's what I was doing
Yeah.
this weekend.
Yeah. So Lee, if you want to unmute yourself, on the bottom of your screen, there's a bunch of little actions, and there's a little microphone on the bottom left that says mute, and you can click on it to unmute. So at the very bottom where there are options for functions that you could do, the mute one is on the bottom left. So you would click on it and it would unmute you. But I can't hear you because you're muted. So yeah. Yeah. I don't think I can unmute you. So here, I just asked you to unmute. So that might make it easier. There you go.
Yeah.
You got it. Good.
Sorry.
Okay.
I did start this 15 minutes ago. I mean, I had a Zoom meeting last night that went perfectly,
Of course. Yes. Would anybody else like to check in and just share anything about your writing over the past week, or any questions that you have before we get started?
One thing I wanted to note, I didn't see I printed stuff out and I didn't see the writing exercise. So I did read everything else, including the stories, and even reviewed last week's session. One thing I will say is the more I learn, the less I know.
Yes, it's true for everyone. Yeah.
So I just have to confess that.
Well, no worries. You're in good company. The lessons are there for you to be able to review and go back to, because we go so quickly in class, and I just want you to be able to sit with it and have it for future use. But there's always going to be writing exercises at the bottom. So readings at the top, writing exercises at the bottom, all the content in between. So make sure you look at that. Yeah, Lee Wen.
The writing exercise we do on our own. We don't need to send to you, right? We just our own. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And the Google Doc is
Yeah.
each week we just go back to the same location. You drop in stuff, we go to find it.
Yep.
Okay. Once I open the Google Doc, do I need to do anything to make sure it's there?
Well, you should download it so that you can keep it, because it won't be open to you forever. It'll just be during this course. So you can download and save. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else want to check in? Hi, Carol. Hi, Allison. Nice to see you both. Would anyone like to check in on what's new and how your writing's going?
Sure. I think, Lynn, I'm moving, so it's been really hectic with doing that. So not a lot of time for writing. I wrote a few times this week, which I was happy with. And I read the pieces that we're talking about today.
Okay.
So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So Carol, did you want to check in or say hi or anything? No? Okay, cool. All right, great. Well, let's jump in. So this week, what we're really going to do for the remaining 3 weeks, this week and the next 2, is to focus on specific ways we can show. So this week is all about action, so verbs versus adverbs. And it's really, I love verbs because, there's so many options, but one really juicy verb can transform a sentence. And so you can have a lot of fun coming up with different verbs and things like that. And so I want you to start to think about that. Now, I'm not going to say that adverbs are always terrible, but I am partial to not loving adverbs because I do believe that we can show more richly than the adverb can do. And so we're going to go through some examples, and then we'll take a look at one of the readings and we'll sort of try to figure out where did they use action to show. So I'm just going to share my screen to go over some of the pieces of the lesson, which makes it easier, I'm sure, for you to be able to see it. So think about adverbs as being a placeholder. So like when I write a first draft of anything, I just let it be a mess. I let the adverbs sit there. I let there be, really weak to be verbs or whatever, just knowing that I can go back and give it some life, just really breathe some life into it. But an adverb can be like one of those red flag words where when you're going back to revise, you look for the adverbs to see if you can transform the sentences into something that's more vivid. So just consider it a placeholder. You may decide as the author that the adverb is what you want, but I would encourage you to consider if there are ways that you can take that adverb and really, revise the sentence or the paragraph or whatever in such a way that it can be a more vivid and immediate scene. So, let's take a look at some examples. So you see those examples with the highlight there. So the first one, I walked cautiously across the room to the back door. So there's some details that we can paint a picture with, but I walked cautiously. Let's see if we can show it. So the next example is I scanned the room, checking for tripwires, pressure plates, anything that looked like it might be a trap. Clear, I darted for the door. Now, it takes some effort to do that, and that has to be in the vein of the story that the person is writing. But you see the caution when it's drawn out in the second example. And so it takes a little bit of time. You have to stop and think, well, what would make this character be cautious? What would be, how can I show this particular person's caution? Because it's different for every character, and it needs to be in their character. It needs to flow with what the reader knows already about them. So the second one, she muttered incoherently, I think is much better when she muttered half words that didn't make any sense. It could be even better if we heard those half words. If we use some dialogue or italics to say, she said, something like that, because then that it's not coherent and you hear her muttering. So any thoughts about those examples? Any questions? No? So the other thing I want to impress upon you is that there are certain adverbs that probably never need to be used, and they are really and very. And we use them to emphasize, just like 5 exclamation points or underlining, like she was very, very sad. So can you paint a picture of how sad that is? How is very, very sad different from sad? And I bet you could, and really is the same thing. So every time you see those pop up in your writing, read the sentence to yourself without that word and see if anything is lost. And my guess is that there's nothing lost and you can just axe it. So those are 2 words that you probably should banish from your writing dictionary. All right, so one thing to really understand when it comes to verbs is passive voice versus active voice. And it's really quite simple. So passive voice is lazy and active voice is active. Passive voice is usually the past tense plus a helper verb, to be, to have, that kind of thing. So you want to, and the easiest way to see it is when the subject is inverted. So if we look at the example here, the Bob was bitten by the zombie, was bitten. So who's doing the action here? Well, the zombie is doing the biting, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all flipped around. And so passive voice makes the sentence really backwards. And so the best way that you can transform it is to flip it around. So you start with who's doing the action. The zombie bit Bob. Of course, the second version there, Bob screamed, jerking his leg from the zombie's mouth, is way more vivid. And we still know that the zombie is biting Bob. So it's not hard. These are not fancy verbs like bit. That's nothing special. Screamed, nothing special, but it's a little bit more imaginative, and the writer is being creative in a way that passive voice is not. So passive voice is another red flag. You could be looking for that in your prose, and you can just say, oh, okay, let me find that subject that's wandered off. Let me flip it around. And so even if you just kept the verb bit and you flip it all, it's immediately better. So there's a little chart in this week's handout that you see here that shows some examples, like the dog is walked by his owner. The owner walked the dog. I mean, it's just really simple to flip it around. And so there's just a bunch of examples there so you can see. Now, passive voice is not the same as past tense. So, if you look at the example here, the chef cooked dinner, that's just past tense. That's active. It's something that the chef did. The subject is still first. And so it's important to distinguish between passive voice and past tense. Past tense, totally cool. It can be really active. And most of our writing is in past tense because it already happened. So that is different. The way that you distinguish between passive voice and active voice is that the person or thing driving the action comes first. So you really want to make it, somebody is doing something. Okay. Here's a few examples from some popular writing. So, I guess just look at the third one. At one time I used to break into pet shops to liberate the canaries. I mean, that's active voice. That's active verbs. Liberate's a great verb. Used to, it's okay. It's past tense. It's not passive voice. So you just think about who's doing what, and you can flip things around. Now there is a time when you might want passive voice. If you write academic papers or academic writing, passive voice is very popular. It's sort of customary. And so don't try to take it out, because that's what's expected in like scientific circles and academic research papers, that kind of thing. But the other thing is, in creative writing, if you want to leave who's doing the action unclear, like if that's not important and you really just want the action or the outcome to be, then you might want to stick with it. So here's an example in purple. If I put it down, the woman was sentenced to 5 years in jail. That's not a great sentence, but maybe we don't need to know about the judge, who's doing the sentencing. Maybe it's just to understand that the sentence is what we want to emphasize, 5 years in jail. So you make that decision. I would recommend that you be really sparing with your choice of passive voice, when to use it. So any questions about that so far? No? Okay. Let's take a look at one of the readings. So I wanted to start with, oh goodness, hold on a second. Okay. I want to start with Mother's top dresser drawers. And this is another one from Brevity. And so what I thought we could do is just take turns reading and just look for the action and really try to come up with, how does the action move this story along? Like, where is it used and where is it done well? So just to keep an eye out for it. So would somebody like to start with the first paragraph for us?
Sure.
I guess I can. Nobody else.
Go ahead, Judy.
To rummage there was to be let in on a secret. You whispered, you tiptoed. Among the satin lace and letters of my mother's was a string of pearls I let trickle across my palm. It had clung to the collarbone of her grandmother, my great-grandmother, Anna B., the one who claimed to be born on the boat coming from Slovakia. Mom and I would roll our eyes. We both would have died in childbirth, we believed, without modern medicine. Sure, born on the boat.
Thank you. Who's next?
I have since worn such necklaces with proper office attire for important meetings where I told grown men what to do with their business's marketing budget, and they listened. I felt brave. I even drove my own car there and back as if we women have always been doing such thing. Anna B, that supposedly water birthed babe, never got her license.
Thank you. Who'd like to continue?
She was 95 when she died in 2002. She had a drawer too, drawers and drawers of things of significance I fingered sacredly, brooches and costume jewelry, stretched out nylon stockings, embroidered pillowcases, rosaries, a whole drawer of twist ties and rubber bands and the backs of used envelopes. I touched everything. It was all odd and otherworldly, important because it was hers.
Thank you. Would somebody like to pick up with only after?
Only after her death did the genealogical records surface to confirm it. Yes, Anna B., born on the boat. Anna B.'s mother had 2 other young children with her and her husband when they set sail. Her parents' names were anglicized from Stephanus and Bronislawa to Bertie and Steve. Bertie set out for a new country that pregnant. Bertie had already lost 2 infants in Slovakia. Bertie would lose 2 more children, age 6 and age 8, in the new country, the country of foreign tongues, the country of promise. Bertie birthed a baby between 2 continents.
Thank you. Somebody like to pick it up from there?
Hi.
I can feel the heat of reverence in my fingertips still, decades removed from my mother's top dresser drawer, where she kept her things of significance. I opened my own top dresser drawer. There's a Westminster Abbey bulletin, a map guide to Paris, ticket stubs for my trip back to the continent, countries maybe Stephanus and Bronislava traveled through to get my in utero great-grandmother here, to get her only son born, to get her granddaughter, to get me. There are hospital wristbands identifying my 3 birth children who survived in sterile rooms with gloved surgeons and nurses, the ones that made it despite the 4 we lost to miscarriage.
Thank you. Would somebody like to finish up for us?
In my 15-year-old daughter, it's my 15-year-old daughter who holds in her hand the string of pearls and asks to wear them now. They make her look old, too much like a woman who came before her. Someday, these things will be yours to wear, yours to bear, I think. Watching her in the mirror, I unlatch the strand and put it back in the drawer. You can tell you are real because of the knots. I hear my great-grandmother say, showing me the way we are strong together.
Thank you. So thoughts about this piece, and definitely talk about the verbs, action, whatever, but also in general, what makes this showing rather than telling?
The right off the bat, the to rummage and tiptoed and gosh, and the whole piece is full of word choices that make you feel like you're there watching the scene. And I really felt it, and I thought it was really touching, and it made me think of being a young child and poking through my grandmother's drawers and the smells and the goodies that were in there that were sort of awe-inspiring for me as a little girl. And that's where this piece took me. I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah. You know, it's funny when I read a piece like this, I can't answer this, but I want to know, what was the writer's process? You know, obviously we can't know it, but I wonder, did she just have that memory of looking through the drawers and was like, I'm going to write about that and see what comes out? Or was the necklace there? Was it in giving it to her daughter down here that she's like, you know, I think there's a story. So I just wonder, and I think it's something like that triggers the initial writing. I know it is for me, you know, there's something that I want to write about and I'm not sure where it's going, but in using the pearls as, you know, strung together to show the generations, it's a genius thread that holds the whole thing together. But I do wonder, you know, what the process was and how she came to write this. So, and it's so long ago. So how does she sit down and say, let's recreate what that was like rummaging through the drawers, even though so many decades have passed, you know. You can even see, I feel like I can see the boat and she wasn't even there. So how does she do that? You know, like what are some of the techniques in the writing that bring us in with her? Anybody have thoughts?
I think that she uses a lot of feeling words, textile words that
Yep.
makes you feel the heat of the beads of the necklace and what was it? She was, you know, just describing how her daughter holds onto the necklace, and words like that, I think, help
Yep.
make it, what is the word? An action, a feeling driven piece.
Yeah. I mean, if you look in the first paragraph, I let trickle across my palm. So the verb trickle is, she doesn't have to describe what it feels like, right? Or what it looks like against her skin. Just the word trickle, you can feel it, you know,
You know
like
what trickle feels like.
yeah, like it evokes a feeling. Same thing with the next sentence. It had, and that's passive voice, but I'm okay with it. It had clung to the collarbone. So the idea of the necklace clinging to the collarbone, again, you don't have to describe what the skin looks like or how it fell or how it felt. You just see that attachment of the necklace and her grandmother's, you know, bony clavicle, and it's vivid, you know? So the verb does it all for you.
Mhm.
Anybody else have thoughts?
I loved the last sentence. I mean, Mom and I would roll our eyes. We
Mhm.
both have died in childbirth, we believe, without modern medicine, sure, born on the boat.
Sure.
I mean, I can just see that in terms of stuff I had with my family when they said something. I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't know. It felt, I felt like I was there.
Yeah,
Because I do have done that.
right, right. And so, you know, that's a great technique too. Sure, born on the boat. Instead of saying, I doubted her story or something, just by, you know, sure, born on the boat, like you can hear the voice in her head. So replacing that internal dialogue with the actual thought makes it more immediate. Absolutely. What else?
And like you just mentioned about usually you say, I thought, I think, so it's better sometimes describe the dog, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But the second paragraph, she uses lots of I, but it works so well.
Yeah.
She said, I have since worn such necklace. And then she wrote, I felt brave. And she said, I even drove my own car there back and forth. But the way she used I,
Yeah.
somehow it's not I think she's describing the same, though using I to start with.
Yeah. And in that paragraph, she's giving us so much information that spans generations without spoon feeding it to us. You know, we see her as this businesswoman. We see the women's liberation that has transformed the generations. You know, we see the little, you know, I love that she keeps up the, you know, supposedly water birthed babe. It's her unique voice, but it's keeping that theme so that we don't forget it. So it's just a little mention. But, you know, she didn't get her license, but I drove myself there, you know. So we're seeing an evolution in the family, but the necklace is the link, which is really cool. It's just that it's evolving in its use and its meaning. Anything else?
I also really liked those. I'm kind of into the little sentences.
Yep.
Birdie birthed a baby between two continents.
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like that's really kind of a powerful
Oh, yeah.
thing.
Well, there's alliteration. So there's 4 words that start with a B.
Yeah.
And then, you know, baby is another B. So that has a musicality to it. And it's a standalone, you know, one sentence paragraph. And it's like, sit with that for a minute, you know, give it a pause. And it emphasizes the importance. I think you're absolutely right. Anything else? Akalpita, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I like the last sentence where She's like, you can tell they're real because of the knots. I hear my great grandmother say, showing me the way we're strung together. So she's used that string of pearls to connect, not only through the story, but also the generations, how it was passed on, and the memory, and a little information about each, like of like a grandmom and all through that. So I really, I think that showed a lot in terms of how she felt about her great grandmother, and how she, you always hear stories about, back in the day, I did this, and it's more like you have lived a life of luxuries, and we've come through all of this. And I think by the end of it, that irony is, that sarcasm is kind of, wedged out, and she's actually appreciating. I mean, that's what I thought through the.
You're right. And I mean, the knots are a metaphor. I mean, so yes, there are literal knots in the necklace, but, or in the pearls or whatever. And I don't even know, because I have pearls, but I can't picture knots and pearls, but I'm going to buy into it. But she's really saying, it's not a smooth path from generation to generation. And she doesn't have to spoon feed that to us. She's quoting her great grandmother, whom she may never have met. We don't know. And that's a great ending, but it's in her voice. Like, instead of, I think she would have said, or, it's just, let's say it. Let's just put it right there. There's nothing extraneous in this piece. Any last thoughts?
Well, I think this is a powerful one, especially for me. I'm really drawn to like the one sentence kind of stuff. I love this whole thing showing the way we're strung together. I think that's really powerful in terms of creating this whole thought of Birdie and how we're going to be there someday, maybe. And, showing us how we're generationally together just with this one sentence.
Yeah. So a couple last thoughts about this piece. There are 2 one-sentence paragraphs, and they work because the other paragraphs are thicker, are more detailed. So you can't do that a lot, but you can do it when you've built it up and you've set that foundation. The other thing is, she stays very clear with the through line about the necklace all the way through, and she sticks to those intricate details so we can see the necklace, but she's playing with it to mean other things. And so the thing that makes this so successful, I mean, there are many things about it, but she is so specific in her details that makes it universally accessible. And that's the thing, is the more specific you get to your experience, ironically, the more your reader can relate. So, hyper focused on her great grandparents or great greats, and their journey over little things about her mom and her, and she's very particular about the details she includes, but they're all well chosen. And so I'm sure this started much longer. It was much messier until she honed it into this form. But, however you start writing something, think about what the outcome you want it to have. And that should really guide you to get there. So she's trying to convey this notion of connection through the generations, and the pearl necklace is a great way to do that. All right, I want to share one other reading before we, let's see if I can get us there. Where is it? Here we go. Now, a lot of my writers really resist poetry, but I like to share it even if you don't write it, because it is so distilled that it's a great exercise in word choice and paring down so that you have only the essentials. And so we're talking about action. I'd like us to look at this poem by Mary Oliver. It is National Poetry Month in the US. This is a very popular poem of hers. And I'd like to look for the action and see how the action transforms or lifts the poem in some way. So when we read poetry, I like to read it twice so that we can really notice it, because it goes by so quickly. So would somebody like to read it once and then we can have it read a second time?
Sure, I'll read.
Thank you.
Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Thank you. Who would like to read it a second time?
All right.
Okay.
Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what's it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Thank you. I don't know about you, but this poem brings tears to my eyes. I find it so powerful. So what is it about the language, the action, the verbs? Like, what is it that makes this poem so rich, so vivid?
Her language makes it really vivid for me. I feel like I'm standing there with the grasshopper in my hand, and I've strolled through the fields all day. And yeah, I am one of the people who doesn't normally read poetry, but I have actually bought a Mary Oliver book that just arrived. I love this poem, and I read it 3 times because, like you said, it was just really moving. It's thought-provoking as well.
Yep.
It makes me think about how often do I take the time to like really notice the details.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's not complicated language here. This is the words are very simple, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Liwan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I like it the way she wrote it. It's very powerful with lots of questions in the beginning, like asking us and then questioning something so simple she's been observing. And then she said, oh yeah, those are the part of life, right? The people die, the grasshopper behaving like this, and then she doesn't know what's going to happen to her, to the grasshopper, and then she related to herself. She's been wandering around. I guess she's been thinking a lot. Then talk about something very deep about death, about the meaning of our lives. But start from the grasshopper is a life. It's a simple life too, but transfer to something meaningful. I think it's the way, the questioning and the description of the grasshopper. And then something jumped to something so deep. It's very moving. So for me. Mm-hmm.
Well, look at this structure too. I mean, she starts with some general questions, like who made the world is a very big, open-ended, unanswerable question. And then, she gets specific. She's still asking big questions. But after 3 lines, she gets very specific. And she goes all the way down until she gets to what else should I have done? Then it gets broad again. But the bulk of the poem, so she sets it up with questions that are big and broad and far-reaching, and she finishes with that. But the bulk of the poem is very specific. Very focused, very immediate for her. So the more specific she gets, the more universally relatable it is. And if you look at the verbs, I mean, there's some great verbs, you know, flung, eating, moving, and then she describes the movement, gazing, lifts, washes, snaps, floats, kneel, fall down, stroll. I mean, those are really like chewy verbs, right?
I
Other-
think something that I liked about it, and I really couldn't connect with it really well, but I'm very focused on run-on sentences. I have a struggle with that constantly in my writing, and I like the way where she chose to put commas and periods and what she chose to put together and keep separate.
Yeah. Well, that's all to do with the form of poetry, Judy. And so, you know, all the grammatical rules don't necessarily apply in poetry because line breaks and whether or not, you know, you break up a whole thought into many lines is about the physical structure, the visual appearance of the poem. So, but if you have a problem with run-on sentences in your writing, you know, all the rules that we were taught when we were younger, we can break if we have a good reason. And so if part of your style is long and winding sentences, that may be your style, but you may want to break it up with shorter sentences so the reader doesn't get tired, you know? So, I mean, that just may be how you write, and that might be okay if you use it to your advantage.
I also loved how this whole thing about the grasshopper, and it made me wonder, what am I missing in my life? What am I not seeing?
Yeah.
What am I not noticing?
Yeah.
And I just think it's amazing that that whole piece about the grasshopper. It made me want to go outside
Yeah.
and look for grasshoppers.
You should do it after the call for sure. For sure. You know, it's interesting. There's, I don't know if you guys have listened to On Being with Krista Tippett. It's a radio show, and they have a podcast. Her voice is very beautiful and soothing. But she replayed her interview with Mary Oliver, who has since passed away a few weeks ago for National Poetry Month, and so it was really beautiful. And Mary read this, and her life was actually very difficult. She had a horrible childhood, and nature was her salvation. Without it, she doesn't think she would have survived. And then she ended up moving to Cape Cod, Nantucket, somewhere out there. And she was actually quite poor and spent a lot of her days, I mean, she was working hard, but then she would be wandering in nature. She felt because of her abusive upbringing, she didn't like being indoors. She liked the expansiveness of nature. And so that's really where she found her voice. And it was just in wandering and noticing that she found meaning, and she does it really well. She really did it well in her poems.
I also like the title, The Summer Day.
Yeah.
You know, I was drawn. Oh God, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the name of the poem. And it just reminds me. Sorry.
What did you like about it?
The summer day. Oh, I look at it because right now it's spring. I said, oh,
Yeah.
spring's coming. And then when I'm trying to make plans for my summer, I'm saying, oh, what's the summer day like?
Yeah.
So I was thinking more before I read it. I was thinking more about the poem is about heat, beach, swimming, you know, all the typical summer things we associate with summer.
Yeah.
But no, it's a summer also. She was on the grass, right? It's summer. She's holding the animal on her hand. It's so close contact. It's warm days. But she knows something, different about life. So, yeah.
And a great thing to do when you read something like this is to try to replicate it yourself. Like, well, what would my summer day be about? You know, how would I write about that? Or like Lee said, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to listen for something or look for something in the grass, and then you write your version of it. So that's a great way to inspire writing too, is that you read something that moves you and you're like, okay, let me use that as inspiration. And it's like a prompt in a way.
Yeah, maybe we could start with spring day, which is current.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I enjoyed the description of the detail of the grasshopper.
Yep.
A few weeks ago, I was writing and was being very detailed about a praying mantis.
Uh-huh.
And giving it more meaning than what it was actually, what it was. And so I enjoyed that part of the poem, how she went into that.
Yeah. I think sometimes in writing, one of the things that we do, and it's really out of care and love for our readers, is we try to make it so clear for them so they don't have to work hard. And in doing so, we're spoon feeding. And so what Mary did in that poem was she just simply described the grasshopper. It was just like, I'm just going to give you those empirical facts of what I see and let them transcend, the automatic meaning and add some depth to it. And so we have to trust that the words we choose can impart a greater meaning than just, the wings or whatever we're going to say. So it's just letting the simplicity make itself bigger.
And that's the hard thing.
Yes.
Is knowing how much to give.
Right. Well, I think if you stick to like the description, the details, then you can't go wrong. And you may on revision decide to pare it down or tighten or whatever, but noticing those details, it's super important. So, how do you do that when you're writing a longer piece or fiction or fantasy or, something that happened 20 years ago? Well, it's hard because you can't look at the grasshopper. You can't just say, here's what it's doing right now. But you can you can interview people, you can do research. If you're writing about family, you can think about, oh, I don't remember what happened at this particular dinner. And you can call someone and say, do you remember? And gather some details. It's fact finding, no good writing just comes right out of here. There's always help. There's always some digging or some research or some studying so that we can really get back there. And, a little bit of imagination too.
Yeah, I'm also wondering her writing process. I mean, before she writes this, what did she, what inspired her? I guess I was thinking she's just walking on the field and saw different animals, saw ants, grasshopper, birds, and she decided to pick up this grasshopper. And then I was thinking, even before she was examining this animal, she was been thinking about her life. That's it.
Yes.
So
I'm going to put the link in the chat for the podcast. I think you guys definitely would enjoy listening to it. But, what she says in this interview is that, she was born in the 1930s. So she was, she started writing in, before the days of computers or anything like that. She didn't take notes when she went on her walks. She had a notebook and she would occasionally, but she says that she never wanted to stop. She wanted to keep noticing. And so I don't know if she stopped at a certain point on the walk and just jotted down notes or if she just recalled it. But I think she let herself be so much in that moment that some of it was imprinted on her brain, on her memory. So that when she went to write about it later, she had experienced it. It's a real question because when I go on hikes, I'm always just flooded with ideas for writing and inspiration and all kinds of things. And I don't often take a notebook. I usually have my phone with me because it has my steps on it and I know how far I've gone, but also in case the kids need me or whatever. But it's in my pocket, so I'm not like on it when I'm walking. And so what I'll do sometimes is I'll do talk to text. I'll just open a note and I'll push the microphone and I'll just like talk into it so that I have a jumble of thoughts and then I put it away because I don't want to stop noticing. So it is a real conundrum because I think to write that vividly, you have to fully immerse in the moment. But if you're fully immersed in the moment, how are you writing down those details, right? It's like a real catch-22.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Could you
All right.
say that again? It felt really important.
I think to get the details, you have to fully immerse in the moment. But if you're fully immersed in the moment, how will you remember the details?
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like somebody saying, okay, we go on vacation, we spend time taking photos, we catch all the special moments.
Yeah.
We want to look at it when we come home or a year later. But the more you take photos, you are losing the enjoyment at that moment.
Yeah.
Right. You're not really, you are thinking, oh my, I want to take a photo and show to my friends to show off,
Yeah.
rather than spending this time just absorb yourself in the view. But I
Right.
want to do both. So
Well, it's interesting. So in January, we went to Washington, D.C. to visit my mother-in-law, and it was really, really cold. And there's a park in the middle of Washington called Rock Creek Park. And I had lived there for years. And my husband grew up there, and the kids were sort of antsy. So I said, let's go on a hike in Rock Creek Park. And I decided I wanted to write an essay about this park. I wasn't sure what the angle would be, but it was probably going to braid my time when I lived there and I used to like mountain bike in the park, and then going with my kids now that are grown. So I did some research in advance about the park, about its history, and I just put a bunch of notes into a document. And then my intention when I was there was to just immerse, but I thought I'm going to take pictures if there's something I want to remember so that I can describe it later. And I probably took 150 pictures and I've not looked at any of them. Which is funny, because I'm like, oh, let me get this rock. Oh, let me get that river or whatever, But I really had experiences with, like, my youngest son was hanging with us. The older three kids were sort of wandering off. And I then when I got back, I sat down and started writing things down. It's still in process, but I was just trying something because I didn't want to disturb the experience of being there. And I thought if I just snapped a picture while I was still looking, I could have it as a reference. So I don't know. I think you have to come up with, your technique that really works for you that doesn't disturb being somewhere, doing something. And sometimes the memories that you have of it, they won't be complete. You won't remember every little detail, but you'll remember what you need to. You can retrieve that, from your memory when you sit down to write. Okay, so I want to get back a little bit to our subject at hand, so then we can do a little bit of writing in about 15 minutes or so. Any other questions before I jump back in? Okay. So something to think about when it comes to action is that it's the core of character. So when the characters stop doing something, they stop seeming real and they just become sort of marks on the page. So the more they're thinking and pondering, the less vivid it is, the less access there is for the reader. So there's got to be a nice balance between the inner dialogue, inner monologue, and the actions. And it's interesting too, because I've written a piece, and it's funny because I can talk about this if you want, but I submit essays. You submit them to a lot of places, and most are going to reject you. This happens for short stories and poems too, and for books, frankly, if you're going the traditional route. But I often get really good rejections. Like, they're not just form rejections. No, it's true. It's like we really thought about it. We liked this about it, but here's why it doesn't fit. And that's very encouraging. So they usually are like, send us something else. And I got a rejection recently for an essay that I wrote about trouble I've been having with my voice. And the editor said, it's a really interesting topic, but there's not enough action. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really good feedback. So I'm going to go back to it and see, like, am I just thinking too much? Like, is it all about thinking? And does that make it boring? And it's possible. So I might want to revisit that. I want to just sensitize you to the idea of some of the red flag words for action. So things that you can look for. And so we talked about adverbs. Anytime you have tried to do something, or the to be, the to plus verb, so to make, to go, to scream, whatever, those are red flags. So like somebody who's trying to do something isn't actually doing it, and can you get rid of the trying and make them do it? So an example, and this is another zombie example, but Bob reached for the rifle to shoot the zombie. So reached for, that for is distancing ourselves from the action. Whereas if Bob grabbed the rifle and shot the zombie, so reached for the rifle to shoot the zombie. So there's the infinitive, to shoot, there's reached for. So it's all sort of hesitant action, but then we tighten it and we say, Bob grabbed the rifle and shot the zombie. It's active. So those are some things to look for. If you look for, tried, to version of the verb, that's one of the places you can usually expand it out and make it just immediately more active. Trying to think what else, because all of this is in the drive. The other thing is that characters are really, they come through in their actions, like it is who they are, and it reveals the true essence of their character. It also keeps the story interesting. So how do you activate your character? You give them something to do. So when characters are sitting around and talking, they're kind of boring. But if they're moving, dancing, making love, committing murder, skydiving, fighting fires, that's really active, and it's a lot of showing. So you can do this in a few different ways. When you create a character, give them an active job. Frankly, even being a homemaker could be an active job. Like, let's see what they do all day long in the house, making beds, sweeping floors, going to the grocery. I don't know, like if you're raising children, I mean, it can be boring, but it can be active. So, but giving them a very active job, like a helicopter pilot or a marine biologist, they're going to have to do active things. So when you're developing characters, think about where they could be active, whether it's in their job description, or if they don't have an active job, is there a hobby or something that is like a huge part of their essential being that is an active pursuit? Those are some great ways to add action. And the other thing is that action in your prose can't be meaningless. It has to have meaning to move the story forward. There has to be a reason that this action is happening right now. And this is true for nonfiction and for fiction. But if your character has a goal and all the actions move them toward the goal, then the story is going to be seamless. It's going to be connected. So if the goal is to find a treasure, and then every step they take is in pursuit of the treasure. If you have a chef who wants to earn a Michelin star for the restaurant, then everything that chef does is working them toward their goal. So think through what the big picture of your story is, what outcome, what are they trying to get to, and then line up your actions so that they get there. So like a detective learns who the serial killer is. Is he gathering evidence? Is he shooting the killer and hiding the body? There are so many actions that can happen to get them there. I always reference Outlander, because it's one of my favorite books, but this is not a spoiler, but in the first book, Claire wants to get back to the Stones to return to her time. Every action tries to get her there. And so when you think about that's her pursuit, that's the goal, then everything makes sense and it sort of falls into line. Another part of action that I think is sometimes overlooked is body language. So it's nonverbal communication, and that's a majority of communication. More so than dialogue, more so than simple back and forth with words. How they communicate nonverbally is huge. So, sorry? Is there a question? No? Okay. So in the lesson today, I gave a bunch of examples about if your reader is cold, anxious, or rude, instead of saying that, you could have them fold their arms, hunch their shoulders. Their hands could tremble. Their teeth could be chattering. There are all these vivid descriptions that are body language that are active, that really communicate that cold, anxious, rude behavior. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. So another opportunity for action too is touch. And that's a huge part of body language and creating action in character. So, you have a crying infant and the baby is soothed by, the parent holding it close, patting its back. So those visceral touches are great details that show action without it having to be over the top, like climbing a mountain or, fighting a bad guy. Or like a child acting up in church and the mother gives the pinch. That's a vivid, relatable action that is all body language, and it says a lot, but it's really all showing. So, visceral responses can activate characters too. Pounding heart, sweaty palms, weak legs, hyperventilating. Those are vivid and they can really communicate. They can make emotional scenes stronger. They can hook readers. They can bring you there with your characters. So those visceral responses and the touch are really important too. So like, if you think about it, let's say you have a character whose house goes up in flames. Are they shrugging because, oh, I have insurance? Or are they hyperventilating, their heart's pounding, and their stomach falls or something like that? Think about how the response can be active, visceral, physical in ways that make it active and really activate the character. Any questions? Okay, let's do a little bit of writing. So let's start with thinking about one of your favorite activities, and I'll put this in the chat. It can be something super active or something that is more sedentary. But like, it can be a sport you play, it could be work you're doing in your yard or your kitchen, it could be something totally different. What I want you to do is to write about it by choosing active verbs to create the action on the page, but also consider, is there body language? Is there touch? Is there some kind of visceral reaction so that combined with the active verbs can help the reader experience it with you? Like they're there with you doing this activity, even if it's an activity they've done, they're experiencing it the way that you do. So I'm putting this in the chat and I'd like to give you a good 10 minutes to sit with that and see where it takes you. So we'll come back at about 10 after and we'll see where we are, okay? Maybe take another minute or two to finish up. Okay. So how did that go?
Thought it was more pleasant than last week's experience.
Do you want to share what you wrote, Judy?
I apologize in advance for my voice. I've recently started taking hormone replacement therapy and it's changed my voice and making it deeper.
No worries.
That's a good story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good story.
Totally.
I should probably go collect the eggs today. I didn't yesterday. If I leave them for very long in the nest baskets, the chickens will poop on them and make them dirty, or break them by being careless, or intentionally breaking them because they belong to a rival hen. The coop is warm and smells like hay and chickens. I open the windows more, feeling the cool breeze flow through and move the stale air, replacing it with fresh, cleaner smelling air. Now I can smell the sheep and the grass from outside. I reach under the warm, moist breast of the first hen and feel the warm eggs. You have quite a hoard today, don't you, lady? Sorry to have to take them. She makes a low sound that sounds between a growl and a purr as I begin to lift the eggs out 3 at a time and carefully place them in the wire basket hanging on my other arm, brushing off any dirt or straw stuck to them as I go. Repeating this process with all the nest boxes and hens until my basket is full and almost too heavy to carry on just one hand. So I grip it with both as I step out of the hen house into the run area, trying not to step on any stupid chickens that stop and squat directly in front of me as I try to walk. Move, don't stop right in front of me. If you get stepped on, it will be your own fault as I nudge one with my foot. That's it.
Love it. It's so immediate. Thank you, Judy. That's awesome. Who else? Carol, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll read.
Okay.
I rose and walked to the window, viewing beautiful sunlight over the new snow. What a great day to be outside and experience nature's beauty. The thermometer hovered at 15 degrees. I dug through my bottom dresser drawer and pulled out my black merino wool tights, matching shirt, and purple wool socks. Hopping from foot to foot on the porcelain tile, I found the one warm spot from the radiant heat to warm my chilled feet. I searched for the label printed in the back and side of the tights, ever desiring to pull them on once and avoid the pull and push of getting them on backwards. Tights first, then the wool socks up and over the black layer of warmth. I reached to the top shelf and pulled down my royal blue Gore-Tex pants, purchased 20 years earlier from the New York winter runs. Long, smooth glides initiated with leg propulsion and arm swings tells others more about one's grace in snow than any clothing item could ever do.
Nice. How did that feel?
I did a lot of scratching out.
All good. That's awesome. Anybody else?
I don't really know if I did it right. I found this really challenging.
Okay.
So I'll read what I did, and I have no idea if, you know what I'm saying, if I did it right at all.
Well, you know what? There's no right or wrong. So I'm just going to disabuse you of that notion right
Okay.
away. Like, there's no right or wrong.
Okay, great.
Okay.
She was sitting in her favorite rocking chair, welcoming, soft, rocking back and forth, back and forth. In it, she pondered everything, dreams of the future, memories of the past. A small black kitty had other ideas. She keeps walking back and forth in front of her place of silence. Her voice loud. The cat is determined. Within minutes, she jumps up into the silence, making sure she's noticed. The little kitty sits down, attention as her claws meet, and her purr breaks the silence. But now she is part of that moment, going back and forth, back and forth.
It's awesome. And yeah, don't judge your writing. Just get the words on the page. You can always enhance them if you want to, but it's just getting those words out there. And frankly, if it was hardly, then think about after the call doing something that you would normally do. Like if you go to make lunch or let's say you have to run an errand or something. Try just noticing it, you know, and maybe even if you want to jot down the steps you take, you know, like if you're making a sandwich, you know, what does the bread feel like? You know, what's the sound when you take it out of the bag? How does it sound when you open the drawer and you get the knife to put, you know, mustard on it or something, or, you know, like go through every detail of it and just notice and see how you would write about that. Like if someone's never made a sandwich before, the way you make it, let them experience it by just getting those details down. And so it's just an activity you normally do, but make it come to life in a way. It's all about the noticing, like Mary Oliver did, which is hard. It's really hard. But you did great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll read.
Great.
At the edge of the concrete, where the patio ceded to the lawn, I stepped out of my sandals, swapping rubber for grass. The first tickle of the cool green blades against the arch of my foot triggered a sigh. The warm air brushed over my lips and my shoulders dropped. I hadn't realized how tight they were until this moment. I spent the day rushing from task to chore on my feet all day, besides a short sit to gobble down leftover quinoa salad, barely tasting it. Now I slowed my steps, pressed each foot into the grass, savored the sensation of it shifting beneath my weight, yielding while also supporting me. The blue Adirondack beckoned me, waiting under the shade of the orange tree. I set my steel bottle of water on the wide armrest and lowered myself into the embrace of the chair, my thighs burning from a long day of bending, squatting, lifting. Resting my head against the faux wood planks, I closed my eyes briefly and listened to the twitter and chirps of birds around me. Opening them once again, I opened the cover of a brand new novel, flipped the edges of the first few crisp pages until the words chapter 1.
Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah, it can be a simple thing like opening a new book, sitting down outside. Like there is so much to notice. And it's up to us to try to record those details so that other people feel like they're there with you. That's the beauty of writing.
I really loved what she said at one point where she was talking about the grass under her feet, how it yielded and supported her. I thought that was just so clever the way you put that together.
Thanks, Judy.
Yeah. So anybody else want to share anything about how it went or share your writing? So, you know, it's interesting when you write, there's a couple of things to think about. Like there are no new stories. There are just new ways to come at them, but there's basic formulas for all storytelling, you know, heartbreak and then, you know, redemption, you find new love, or loss and you survive it, you get through it, you know, grief and mourning and pick yourself back up. There's just certain formulaic stories that all people tell, but how you do it is what distinguishes it from something else. And there's usually a formula to writing that is like the 2/3, 1/3 formula, where 2/3 is pretty much like what other people are doing, but the 1/3 is what you are uniquely bringing to it. So, like when you think about what you write and the subject matter and how you approach it, some of it is going to be similar to what's already out there. It's a style, it's a formula, it's expected, it's in sort of the literary vernacular today. But there's a third of it that is uniquely you. And that's sort of where the noticing comes from, the details you would choose versus somebody else would choose other details. Even when it comes to action and the things we talked about today, even the verb choices, there's so many verbs to choose from. So when you choose one, somebody else would choose a different one. And the same exact story, like if I'm sitting next to Allison and we're both on blue Adirondack chairs and we're both opening new books, what we write about that moment is going to be vastly different. 2/3 of it will be similar because we're doing the same thing, we're in the same place, but the difference will be in the details and how we choose words to bring that scene to life. And so that's what you bring to the page, the way that you experience something and the way you notice it. So the interesting thing is that, like when I mentioned earlier, that if you're trying to recreate a memory for the past and you don't know all the details, or you don't know what it sounded like, or what it smelled like or whatever, you can interview family members. You can try to go back in your memory, but even those family members are going to have a different memory of it than you did. So it's a different version of the story. Like I can't tell you how many times I'll sit with my sister and brother and we'll talk about something from childhood, and each of us experienced it so differently. Or there are times I don't even remember it and they do, or vice versa. Where I'm like, remember this time? And they're like, what? So it's you have to trust in your ability to see and notice and bring insight to the world through your words. That's why we write. We write to inspire other people, to show them that they're not alone, and to give them a transformational moment where they can access a world that was not available to them before. You brought it to them. And that's really important. So, all of the disquieting voices inside our heads that tell us, I'm not good enough, or did I do it right, or am I really a writer? Like so many people won awards and they're on the New York Times bestseller list, blah, blah, blah. Those voices are just self-protective because we're bearing a piece of our souls when we start to write. And that's really scary. That's really dangerous. Somebody could be like, I don't know. I don't understand. That's not my experience. Actually, that happened to me. And for those of you who've heard the story before, forgive me, but when my second book of poetry came out, and this was in 2002, I think, and I was sort of newly married, and I was with my husband's extended family for a holiday, and that included his brother-in-law's mother, whom I barely knew, and she was a very forbidding woman and very like religious and very like set in her ways. And my chapbook of poems was about the main central prayer in Judaism, which has 18 blessings to it. And so I wrote a poem for each of the blessings, and it's said 3 times a day. And so it's fundamental to Jewish observance. And it had just come out, and I brought it with me, and my sister-in-law wanted to see it, and I was really excited about it. And it was how I experienced each of these blessings, when I was doing this prayer. And this mother-in-law looked at it. She's like, I want to see it. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea she'd be interested. And she read it, and she goes, yeah, doesn't mean that to me. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so be it. Like, she's not my reader, but she was never going to be my reader. So, I didn't let it crush me, but I sort of laughed at it because I was just like, I've never had a response like that before, like, wow, okay, shoot it down, no problem. And so we just have to remember that like, not everybody's your reader, but some people are. And it's for them and for you that you write. Any last questions?
So I'm new to this writing, and it's kind of off the topic of the class, but I having a hard time keeping my writing and my scenes straight in my head.
Okay.
And I know that writers use writing softwares, and I don't know if it's really useful. I don't want to get into anything that's too complicated and it takes forever to learn, but
sure. So I don't use any particular software, so I'm not able to answer that. And you could Google it and search. But what I do is when I'm writing a book, if it's a fiction, if it's a novel, I start writing, and then as I get in and the characters start to develop, I create a new document and I start to make an outline of who the characters are and what the connections are so that I can remember. So that's how I keep myself straight with fiction. With nonfiction, I often do that ahead of time because I have all the material and the research, and nonfiction's different. So I've investigated a little bit and gathered it all. And so I'll create a structure before I start writing because I have all the material. But fiction, I do it and let it evolve as I go through the story. And in fact, I think I was probably 100 pages in with my current novel before I did my outline, just because I needed to keep track and make sure I remembered names and how many kids does this one have and where do they live, and you know what I mean? So so that was just to keep me on the straight and narrow. Does anybody else have a trick that they do?
Actually, there is an app called Ulysses, which is, so my thing is, I get all these ideas when I'm not close to any book or anything, but I usually have my phone with me. So this is an app which you can have, download on your laptop as well as on your phone.
Okay.
And it just syncs automatically. So you have an idea or a thought or whatever, and you've penned it out there. It's gone in your storyline, and you can so it's like you can reshuffle pages, you can order them, so it's like you have an outcome, and it's very simple to use. Like, I am again not very fond of too technical stuff where I'm half the time trying to figure out what I'm doing.
Yep.
So it's very easy to figure out. So if you would want to do that,
Okay.
it just helps you. For me, it helped me in putting my otherwise I had it in all different places and I was losing all my ideas, and then I kept trying to remember what did I think of when.
Okay.
So this app just helped me out there.
My son-in-law researched that and had recommended that as something to look at for me, but I haven't really done that as much. I was kind of hoping for like a storyboard type thing, but to sit and write out stuff on a bunch of cards would be crazy, make me crazy.
So that's why this is like it's basically any Word document that you open up. It just outlines, sort of sorts it out for you and puts it in the order that you want to. And then you just, you're literally like moving cards, how you would do that. You're moving sheets in that order when you want to, whenever you have the time to get onto your laptop.
Awesome.
Right? You can also do that on your phone. So if it helps.
Excellent. Any last questions before we finish for today?
I just wanted to add, when I was writing, I did a lot of scratching out because I just realized how much of all the red flag words that you were talking about, I was using them throughout. Yep. And then I was like, no, this is not this. So, it's harder.
It is hard, but I would really caution you not to do that in the act of creation. I would just write and then go back, because you'll have fresh eyes and you won't feel, because it can really freeze you if you look for those while you're writing. Like, right. You just want to get your beautiful ideas on the page and then go back and say, okay, let's clean it up, let's make it better, but it can really prevent you from getting anything on the page, because you're like judging it the whole way as you're going. So change the brainwaves. So there's creation mode and there's revision mode.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes,
not related, very quick question. For the previous class, I need to download the comments by midnight today, or what's the deadline?
Yeah, by like 6 or 7 today.
PM.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Cool. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Email me if you have any questions, and can't wait to see what you come up with. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.